So please take your seats and we will begin almost immediately. We have a very distinguished panel with people coming from all over the world, from Japan, India, Russia, Egypt, Bulgaria, so all the neighborhood of the Caspian countries. So please take your seats and we will begin as soon as you are ready.
Мурат?
Извините, немножко задержался. Sorry.
Yes, we are ready to start.
Yes.
Everyone, please, Murat, introduce the club and I will follow up with the guests. Please.
Thank you very much for your attention. This is a strategic initiative which we formulated some time ago to create a Caspian Ambassador Club because a lot of people are discussing business, a lot of people discussing science, new technologies, digital technologies, but also very important that on the political and diplomatic level there should be very good communication between the Greater Caspian region and the whole world. And that's why I will now give the floor to Veselin Popovsky, Dr. Veselin Popovsky, who will now start introduction of the participants of the discussion. Then we'll move to the inauguration of the Caspian Ambassador Club.
Thank you very much, Murat. My pleasure to be here, invited to inaugurate this amazing opportunity for all business people, academics, diplomats, and to join the Caspian Ambassador Club and to promote projects that will develop sustainably the region. The idea came recently and we are already working on the details. It will be a synergetic community of prominent diplomats, academics, business leaders to originate and to develop projects that will help to promote social and economic development in the Caspian region. As you all know, in August 2018, a convention on the legal status of the Caspian Sea was signed, with all 5 coastal states becoming members. And in a personal reflection, I was part of the Bulgarian Foreign Ministry at the time when the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Convention was signed in 1992. And the cooperation developed quite interestingly with Parliamentary Assembly, Business Council, Trade and Development Bank, as well as Academic Research Institute on the Black Sea Studies. So we very much expect that the Caspian cooperation will follow already a very good model from the Black Sea Economic Cooperation. And we have really distinguished people today. I'm very pleased to welcome all who fly all over the world to Davos in this week. We have people from Russia, from India, from Japan, from Egypt. And if you add Bulgaria into that, you have all the circle around the Caspian region. So what I will do first is to give everyone a minute or two simply to introduce themselves, and then I will follow up with some questions. So please, Vladimir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very pleased to be invited here. I worked over 30 years in the Soviet-Russian Foreign Ministry, stations Berlin West, Berlin East, Austria, Vienna, Switzerland, Bern. So I organized 4 times Davos Forum, World Economic Forum for Russian governmental delegations. And finally, ambassador of the Russian Federation to Germany over 6 years. Then I worked a year in Gazprom, Germany, as a managing director. And after that, I grounded my own company, ECOVIS Strategic Consulting, in Berlin. I'm a member of International Economic Synod, Berlin, unites about 100 German companies. And I am a member of Eurasian Banking and Financing Association in Moscow. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Pratibha Jain. I'm a lawyer. I have had the privilege of working in New York, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and now finally back home in India. focus on law and economics, and I also work very closely with the Indian government, especially the Ministry of Finance. Recently helped them set up a $6 billion quasi-sovereign wealth fund in partnership with various sovereign wealth funds across countries, including Russia. We looked at doing joint development in India. I am the founding partner for the Delhi office for Nishith Desai Associates, which is one of the leading law firms in India. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Veselin. My name is Suki Hasegawa. I'm currently the president of the Global Peace Building Association of Japan. I spent 37 years with the United Nations in the 7 countries and New York, Geneva, and Tokyo. I was in Somalia when US troops had to withdraw from the country. And then I was followed to move into the Rwanda, where I spent 2 years as the head of UN humanitarian and development agencies. Then I was assigned by Kofi Annan in 2002 to go to East Timor. And I performed his special representative, Kofi Annan's rep, in Timor-Leste for 2 years. So I am very pleased to share with you my experience with the United Nations.
All right, good morning to all of you. My name is Raj Kumar. I am a professor of law and Vice Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University and Dean of Jindal Global Law School. Vaseline is a wonderful colleague of mine. It is wonderful to be back here in Davos at the Caspian Week. My own academic background is that I studied law in Delhi, at Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar, at Harvard Law School, and later worked at a corporate law firm in New York. And during that time conceived the idea of building India's first global university and spent the next several years teaching in Japan and in Hong Kong, after which I met with an Indian billionaire by name Naveen Jindal in the year 2006 and 7 and persuaded him to do 3 things. 1, to make a substantial financial contribution. 2, to do it in a not-for-profit manner. And 3rd, to let me have the academic freedom and autonomy and independence. I returned to India in the year 2008 and spent the next decade building the university from scratch. We started in a very modest manner with 100 students and 10 faculty members. And today we have nearly 5,000 students and 500 faculty members across 8 different schools in law, business, international affairs, public policy, liberal arts, journalism, architecture, and banking and finance. I'm very excited to be here because I want to share the experience of corporate philanthropy and higher education and how these 2 things can shape the future of institution building and nation building, particularly in the Caspian countries region.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, thank you very much for coming today. I am Hassam Negm, the first secretary of the Embassy of the Arab Republic of Egypt in Tokyo. I'm the head of the Economic, Commercial, and International Cooperation section of the embassy. Before being a diplomat, also, I worked in the petroleum sector in the Egyptian General Petroleum Corporation and the Egyptian holding company for natural gas, EGAZ. As a diplomat, I served in Libya and for 1 previous term in Tokyo, and again started my 2nd term in Tokyo from 2016 up till now. I studied at the United Nations University of Tokyo, International Peace and Security and United Nations Systems and Global Challenges, and also studied master's degree in economics at the Faculty of Commerce in Shams University in Egypt. I'm very happy to be among these distinguished guests and also helping my colleagues in launching this very prominent, what we say, Dr. Veselin, about the Caspian Ambassador Club. So thank you very much and looking forward for having a nice seminar today.
Thank you very much. Also, as you can see, we have not only geographical diversity, but also diversity in terms of experiences and expertise. So we are interesting combination of diplomats including UN officials, academic leaders, and business leaders. And this is exactly how we see the future of the Caspian Ambassador Club evolving as a synergy between those three communities, the business community, the academic community, and the diplomatic community. And the purpose really here is to create this synergy to promote projects that will develop the social and economic sense those countries. So my first question to all the panelists will be to illustrate from your experience a successful models of international assistance for sustainable development. I'm sure you have such experiences in various countries. So what, in your view, will be the future of the Caspian region, and how states, donors such as Japan, European Union, but also the newcomers into the global politics such as India and China can support the Caspian region?
Yeah. Veselin, I think that's a very excellent question. How we can achieve sustainable development goals. SDG are the only goal that the entire member states of the United Nations agree to. We all strive at it. And the Caspian countries are also among middle income countries. They are devoting to their energies for SDGs. But let me mention to you one thing. What is the difference between SDG and the MDG that we achieved a lot? SDG, uniqueness of that is these goals are owned by developing countries. You know, 3 co-chairs of SDG Commission. They are David Cameron, Cicero Van Yuridiano, and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. I had an opportunity to work with 2 of them, presidents in Indonesia and Liberia. You know, they own SDGs very much. It is not like MDGs imposed by OECD DAC and agreed by the UN Secretariat. It is the goal that they have come up with. So, for the Caspian countries, I believe that leaders of Caspian countries, they should not only own it, but be responsible for implementing and achieving their goals.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Suki. That's really important to stress how important it is to have that connection between the sustainability and development. And for that matter, let me also ask the panel to reflect on issues other than finance and economics that can probably promote the future human development. The importance of world-class universities, the philanthropists who might be able to initiate such projects and such universities, that because the future is about science, education, and promotion of sustainability. So I would like to ask the panel to reflect on the philanthropy, the link between philanthropy, business, and education.
Well, thank you so much, Vaseline, for that. One of the things that is, let's say, less pronounced in these forums is the importance of knowledge creation, and to what extent knowledge creation and universities are at the bulwark of social and economic development. In fact, the need for establishing world-class universities in developing countries is as significant as the need for creating knowledge and contributing to research with a view to transforming societies, be it in the context of issues surrounding healthcare, or for that matter, issues surrounding environment and climate change, new technologies that are going to shape the future of the world. The heart of this innovation and research and development ought to be taking place in universities. And hence, I strongly believe that Caspian Sea countries in particular, but also countries around the world, need to invest in higher education, need to invest in the need for building sustainable societies with knowledge as its foundation. And also it's important to recognize that for advanced levels of economic development, you need to have bright and well-educated young population who can contribute to that advancement. For a country like India, for example, where I come from, 850 million people in India are less than 34 years of age. And that also means that as a young country, more and more people are seeking education. And this, I believe, is essential for the future of all countries, including the Caspian countries. And another related aspect is that how do you create wealth surrounding the building of universities? Gone are the days when state and countries' own resources need to be pulled in for higher education. The example of privatization of Indian higher education, including establishment of world-class universities, focuses on corporate social responsibility and corporate philanthropy, which needs to invest in higher education. Corporations generally tend to be indifferent about this, and it's important as new economies are emerging, we need to look at the relationship between philanthropy and higher education.
Thank you very much, Raj. Indeed, and following from that, the link between business, education, and sustainable development, it's also interesting to think about how the law profession and diplomatic profession can add to create a better business environment. Indeed, if we think of the profession of a lawyer and a diplomat as contributive to creating a business environment, I think another lesson, and I'm very much looking for the panel to reflect of exactly how diplomats and lawyers can build a successful business environment. Who wants to? Okay.
Sure. Should I go on law first? So, I'll talk of the Indian context, even though I've seen it in the other jurisdictions that I've practiced. But I think India is a very good example of growth in business based on a rule of law society, and rule of law is so important there. India, for 2018, had the highest greenfield investments of any countries, it be China and US. And I think a predominant reason for that is having a rule of law society, a very strong independent judiciary, the bureaucracy being independent of the political system, and being able to implement the laws, the contracts that businessmen enter into. In fact, I think India probably today has the highest number of bilateral investment arbitrations against it. And in the Indian judicial system, the Indian government is the biggest litigant. So highest number of cases have been filed against the government or by the government, which creates some certain other problems, but just shows the strength of the democracy where businesses can take the government to court and look for resolution. And in my experience, because we work a lot with foreign investors either coming into India or taking Indian investors outside the country, so cross-border transactions, people coming into India take a lot of, the businessmen take a lot of solace in the fact that you do have ultimately recourse. And even if you don't get the recourse in Indian courts, you can go for international arbitration. And all these arbitrations are going to play out, and Indian government, if it gets judgments against it, and these arbitrations will have to pay out. So I think, the strength of Indian democracy, the rule of law society, has translated into good business. And that is proven in numbers. India is the fastest growing economy today in the world. And that's been through a design, where in the 2008 economic crisis, or even the ones before, India did well. And then that again was based on a model that was, it's still flawed. People who would have done business with India know the complications that come with it. But I think what sustains it is the role that the judiciary, the legal system, the legal profession, I hope, is continuing to play in India.
Thank you, Pratibha. Let me just add to that Pratibha was a bit modest in her initial introduction. Her firm, in the end, it's probably interesting for the audience to know, has among its clients some of the best and the highest respectable banks in India, Flipkart, Amazon. She has done advisory and litigation for many, many companies. So those of you who are interested in business in India, Pratibha will be the first point of contact here.
Talking about sustainability. Okay. Talking about sustainability and development in this region, I would mention, first of all, it's a very important and very rich region. Not only the Caspian countries, but also Central Asia and practically so far to the Middle East and Near East. That's why there are a lot of interests of the global players in this region. And I'm sure this region will increase and develop, but I would see this development in the larger framework of Eurasia. And that's why the region is facing also some dangers and challenges. But I would like to report about this a little more in detail in the afternoon by the session Trade and Barriers. I invite you to this session too.
Well, thanks, Excellency. I'd like also to elaborate more on Egypt's vision for the year 2030, which is in line with the SDGs, since we're speaking about sustainable development. The national strategic plan's 3 dimensions, economic, social, and environmental, are based on 10 pillars covering the SDGs. The plan aims via many programs and policy measures to put Egypt on the path of sustainable development. The economic reform program, which Egypt started 4 years ago, resulted in many positive outcomes. The credit ratings for Egypt by many international institutions like Fitch, Moody's, Standard & Poor's improved and has been the best so far since 2011 after the turmoil. The Egyptian government has implemented structural reforms which improved the country's economic indicators and helped to attract further regional investments, and the economic diplomacy played a great role in this matter of attracting the investments. Also, I'd like to speak about the Zohra gas field, which was discovered in 2015 and considered to be the largest gas discovery in the Mediterranean, increased its production to reach 2 billion cubic feet per day from 350 million BCFD when it began its commercial production in January 2018, making Egypt become an important player in the Mediterranean. Foreign investments in Egypt's oil and gas sector rose to $10 billion United States dollars in the 2017-2018 financial year. Egypt is planning to become a regional hub for the trade of LNG. The country hosted its first ever regional gas forum on the 14th of January 2019 by the attendance of ministers in concern from Egypt, Israel, Cyprus, Greece, Italy, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority. Moreover, the Egyptian government capitalizes on synergies between the governmental, private sector, and civil society efforts to achieve its ambitious sustainable development agenda. Egypt enjoys a wide range of regional economic partnership agreements with the EU, the COMESA, and the Arab region, making it an attractive hub for foreign investors. I'd like also to mention that Egypt enjoys strong bilateral relations with many Caspian countries, like Russia, for instance. The Egyptian and Russian presidents signed recently a strategic cooperation treaty in October 2018 to increase trade, military, and other ties between both countries. Egypt-Kazakh bilateral relations also, for instance, witnessed by remarkable developments, and the relations were strengthened after the visit of the Egyptian president to Kazakhstan in 2016. Possible means of cooperation can be studied in the coming period between Egypt and the Caspian region as well.
Thank you, Hassam. Now I would like to ask the panel to reflect on the changes in the world. We live in a bit of a dynamic time. Somehow when Davos started 40 years ago, it was only few rich countries, but actually the global map has developed dramatically since then. We have the rise of BRICS, we have also the rise of many regions, and now it's very difficult to talk in terms of only global powers. The global map has changed significantly, and definitely that will also reflect on the Caspian region. So in terms of search of new partners, in terms of search of new norms. So the question I am very interested to know is how this dynamic change will affect the social and economic development will the new players who are coming into the map, such as India, such as China, Brazil, South Africa, Russia, and so on, will develop a different policy in terms of international assistance, in terms of sustainability, climate change? Will they be able to rise to the challenge of addressing those dynamism in the global politics?
I think, Veselin, you made a very good point. I think currently we have one body that brings BRICS, others, new countries together. That's a G20. The Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan is meeting Putin today in Moscow. And he's flying in tonight or tomorrow morning. And I hope you will join us in hearing what he's going to say. What he wanted to share with you is a new notion of development. Japan is no longer the major power such as the United States or China, for that matter, but yet we think we can play a small but constructive role. And that is to have a real partnership with our partners. That means that these partners, they have to feel responsible and accountable for what they are trying to achieve. Japan can provide the technical assistance, but yet, in the end, what counts is a commitment of the leaders to their national projects. He's going to say that, and I hope you will support him and other Caspian countries' leaders.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, just from India's perspective, specifically on the sustainability goals, I think India's just in World Economic Forum, it's been announced that India's beat all other countries in terms of providing aid for sustainable development goals. So I think countries like India, China are redefining, and specifically I see this in India's foreign policy. There's a lot more focus on the neighbors, and that includes the Caspian countries. It's extended to the Caspian countries, and there's especially Prime Minister Modi's looked at developing these regional relationships a lot more and creating synergies there, which is, I think, going to redefine, because if these countries look at, for example, the model that India's taken for development or China's taken for development, it's very different from the Western models. And I think it helps, like we also work with some foreign governments, we work with Mauritius, we work with Singapore, and these are small countries that have done well for themselves. Mauritius, for example, is not a country that's well endowed in terms of natural resources, but they've taken the knowledge economy, as their main way of moving forward in the world, and done very well for themselves, and has very close relationships with India, and has used India's economy as a stepping stone for anybody to enter Indian economy, because it has very good bilateral treaties with India. So I think the regional cooperation is going to, seeing China and India grow in this region, is going to help the Caspian countries too, in terms of developing those relationships and looking at a regional cooperation, which is going to redefine the way we look at world. And we've already seen that. I think the Prime Minister of Azerbaijan was in India last year. Our president was in Tajikistan last year. We are getting the Kazakhstan Prime Minister to India this year. Trade's grown, I think with Azerbaijan it grew 40% last year. Even though these countries are, I think only, it's a very small percentage of India's trade today. I think it's only 0.11% if I remember correctly. But it's growing. And the potential for growth is immense. So I think, the future is going to look at this region.
Absolutely. So one of the things which we need to also recognize is that the future of knowledge base is also changing dramatically. Out of the 26,000 universities in the world, 13,000 of them are in Asia, 9,000 are in the BRICS region, if you look at those numbers. And so in some ways, the future of knowledge production and knowledge dissemination, but also developments in research is going to emerge out of countries in the south. And this is an important development, which I know for sure Russia is conscious of, and equally it's important for Turkmenistan as well as Azerbaijan and other countries in the Caspian Sea to be conscious of. And why this consciousness is important is that we need to invest in higher education. We need to focus on not only educating people at the level of primary and secondary, but also educating people to at the highest levels of academic engagement that can empower them to take meaningful job opportunities, but also create jobs. I mean, one of the remarkable things about technology is that we are creating new generation entrepreneurs who are able to redefine the nature of workforce. And one of the things that artificial intelligence and robotics and machine learning is going to do is to dramatically transform the nature of workforce, and many jobs that are there today may not exist. But that means that we need to create new knowledge and new perspectives which ought to emerge out of universities, which in turn can shape the future. And that's why universities, I believe, will play a very significant role for shaping the future.
Yes, absolutely. I think in Davos there often talks about the future of artificial intelligence, of robotics. And I think if we need to tell our students what the future, we might not really exactly fix their future employment, but if you develop the skills and the opportunities which Raj was talking about, I think that is the model. So somehow they shouldn't worry that what they decided to work might not be there after 20 years. They need to create the robot to take their own job and think to free their time in order to create the next robot. So if I'm thinking of the future in terms of, oh, I worry that the robot will come and teach my students, I actually should be happy if the robots come and teach my students, because that will free my time to do more research and writing. And actually I will create the next robot to do the research and writing the books. So that's the way to think about future, not to worry about the robots, but to create the robots to do the repetitive tasks in your own office, so that your mind go further into the future and create the next generation of knowledge. Mm-hmm. For that matter, it's very interesting also to reflect exactly as we said, the shifting geopolitics. See who is not coming to Davos. Donald Trump is not coming to Davos. Theresa May is not coming to Davos. Macron is not coming to Davos. So those big players 20, 25 years ago are not going to, and why they're not coming? Because they have huge problems in their own countries, facing the Gilets jaunes, facing the Brexit, facing the prosecutions. But who is coming to Davos? It is Prime Minister Modi, it is Putin, it is Prime Minister Abe, it is the Egyptian Prime Minister. So really, in a world of dynamic change, we need to think exactly what that global, but then my kind of selfish question here would be, because I do a lot of research on international law, I wonder what will be the future of international law? Will the international law develop having in mind those new players, or will be similar to what we had in the past? How do you see the role of international law in future relations between states, but also between businesses and between corporations?
But maybe first a step back to the Caspian region from robotics.
Sure.
I would like to draw your attention to another organization. It is a Shanghai organization
Please.
of cooperation, and I think this organization will be very important for Caspian or Trans-Caspian region in the future. Why? Maybe two examples. As a child, I spent 3 years in India, and I was witness of the war between India and Pakistan, as Pakistani aircraft bombed New Delhi. So now we have two countries as associated members of the Shanghai organization. It was a sensation in principle, but nobody in Europe talks about that. And second example, I said already about dangers and this bow of instability in Asia, in Eurasia, especially in the Near East, is really dangerous for a lot of huge projects generally in Eurasia. So we can approach all these projects knowing that this very unstable situation, especially in Afghanistan, prevents us from financing, investing, and so on. And I would see the way as this civil war, these problems between clans and ethnic groups in Tajikistan have been settled, and maybe that could be a model for all of us and for international law in Afghanistan. But to the law, maybe a couple of words. I'm absolutely sure that we have now great problems with implementing or just realizing the international law as it is just written. We need the transformation of this law, and we need the reform of the United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one question related to that, and it will be my last question because I give little time left for the audience also to reflect on our topics today, which is the role of leaders and the need of a strong leadership exactly in facing those future challenges we are talking about. It's much more difficult to govern the world today than 30 or 40 years ago, exactly because of the dynamism of change. Leaders cannot really have time to, they might be already obsolete in their thinking if they don't grasp the latest knowledge and the latest dynamism. So how the panel think about the future role of leaders in facing those future challenges?
I think, yeah, please go ahead. No, please, yeah.
Complexity of any kind expects leadership which focuses a lot more on bringing together people. I think one of the things that we can see, whether it's in the US or in Europe, if leadership doesn't recognize the importance of global collaboration and cooperation, it is not going to advance the idea of even individual national development. Caspian Week is about platform for global ideas. So global leadership is about recognizing the importance of collective consciousness that can transform society. Unfortunately, you see some of the ideas of the global imagination being undermined and threatened in many parts of the developed world. And it is in this context that I see a lot more hope from India and China, but also in other parts of Asia and Middle East, which needs to recognize that the global consciousness is ultimately need to be benefited for the entire humanity. And we need to, fashion or rather refashion our ideas relating to trade and investment and knowledge creation with a view to have a more inclusive approach towards global governance.
I think very much I agree with you, Kumar, very much. But I'd like to add to that the role of women. Yesterday, I enjoyed listening to you all for 2 hours. And I remember that Alexandra and Aji and Maria, you are talking about this women's leadership in the corporate governance. And I would like to, in fact, join you and then to transform what Kumar has said. That is, collaboration should be also made and the leadership exercised to transform the society. And this is the key. And I'd like to share with you what happened 150 years ago in my country. Japan is known as one of the lowest in the ranking in terms of women's representation in parliament. 150 years ago, do you know what happened? The Western powers, they colonized South and Southeast Asia. And they moved up and started going into China. And they came to Japan and to colonize. Americans came first, and the British and the French in the south, and the Russians from the north. And you know, we had 260 independent samurai clans. They are totally independent. Just like now, we have 192 nation states. They are independent and sovereign. And they started fighting each other and saying, look, we have to somehow get rid of Tokugawa shogun, who is the biggest one at that time, and another factions to do. And then Tokugawa area advisor said, okay, let's bring in the French. And the other one said, British. And do you know what the women said? This is a Princess Kazunomiya and Atsuhime, the wives of the last two shoguns. They said, look, we have to stop fighting among ourselves. And we have to be united. So they asked the biggest shogun, the last shogun, to step down and transform the society. There is no more samurai privileged class. Everybody is equal. And the land reform, taxation, and all other things are implemented. So I would like to join very much what you said yesterday, and also to apply it at the national level, where we need a new way of thinking to transform the society. Next page, please.
Back to the. Thank you.
If I may repeat,
Yeah.
yesterday
Yes.
you also mentioned that you have just put a female captain on your vessel.
Yes.
And this
That's
is
a-
the first time in history, right?
It is. And very much, I think it's a female or even the male. But what I think we have learned, among others, from Einstein. Einstein said, look, it's insanity doing the same thing over and over again and expect the different results. And he says, in addition, that knowledge, as Kumar said, is more powerful than the sword. But he says imagination is even superior to the knowledge. So I think if we can take his advice, maybe we can translate that. And I'd like to add to that what Immanuel Kant said. Immanuel Kant said, look, we have to really stand by with the truth. And he says there are two things in our world that are important. One is a transparency. Multilateralism forces you transparency. You cannot make a deal with one people, one group, one country, and get away. You can be fair to that one person, but if others don't see it, then the whole things will collapse. So, Immanuel Kant says, you have to align your behavior to your motive. And if it's aligned, you are strong. And I think we can overcome all the current problems in a transparent and accountable way. And last thing Immanuel Kant said is, apart from the accountability, it's a humanity. Humanity is end in itself. You cannot exploit people to achieve other ends. And do you know Trump's first lady, Melania? Is that her name? Melania. Look at her. She said, my husband, you cannot separate these children with the people trying to cross the border. You have to keep the humanity together. And Trump has to accept that. That's the strength of, I think, our own leadership. Thank you.
So to me, this is true leadership. You know, finding an example from history to show the contribution of women. That's the inclusiveness that we are looking for. And you know, I honestly believe that it's the men created the problem, and the men have to find the solutions. So that's a great first step.
Can we pass the mic?
Thank you. I would like to add to your imagination that, along with what Mr. Einstein said, I know another quote that says that you cannot resolve an issue or a problem with the same thinking that created it. So we have to turn the page and use our imagination and think out of the box, like one of the lady panelists also said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Vladimir.
Maybe two remarks. First of all, thank you for this wonderful session yesterday about women leadership. I believe in the next future, business women, businessmen will play much more important role in the politics. I hope so. Not professional politicians, but people with this business, economical experience, huge experience. And second remark is, Angie Hartman said yesterday, women are better diplomats. I applaud it. Thank you.
Let me add something, because we have a lot of wisdom from Europeans like Einstein and Kant and Asians, but let me add also an African proverb, which is quite good to bring into the discussion of education and leadership, is that if you educate a man, you educate one person. If you educate a woman, you educate the whole village. And it's also very...
And another one, the concept of Ubuntu, which is about we are all in this together. The lived experiences of other is equally important for our own experience, and for our own connection to the world is actually defined by other people's suffering as well. So if anybody suffers anywhere, it ought to become part of our own suffering. That's the concept of Ubuntu, which Deshmant Tutu and others have really articulated. And I think it's much more relevant to today's world than any time before.
I think Ms. Katerina's, I think what you said is quite true. You know, the Chancellor Angela Merkel, she came to Japan and said, look, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, what is Japan doing with all these refugees and the migrants? And says, well, we have to do it. Do you know, he's going to announce to you tomorrow, if he comes, because it's already decisions made, that Japan is taking 350,000 migrants from other countries. And they are starting this April. Now, they are going to do it in a little bit differently. As you are saying, that the problem we are facing today cannot be solved at the same level of thinking that existed when that problem was initially created. And that is the UNHCR's, this Refugee Convention on non-repertoire, that you cannot just push back, just take anybody and be responsible. Now Japan, we are already crowded and small country. We like to take them in, but we are making agreement with the sending countries to train these people in the language and other basics so that they can come and be a part of us. So that's a new solution. And we would very much appreciate if you can improve that way of doing it. Maybe it is good, but maybe it is not perfect.
Good. I think we will all agree that the Caspian Ambassador Club is in a very competent and strong hands, listening to our excellent panelists today. We are a bit short of time. It's already after 1 o'clock, the time we had to finish. If there is no more question, I would like to thank our distinguished panelists who came from all over the world to participate today and actually to launch this excellent initiative to have a collective ambassadorship to promote the Caspian countries and their social and economic development, to make the business environment much more integrative and smooth, with the, as the panelists said, the synergetic forces of academia, diplomacy, and the law profession. So again, thank you very much for coming today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.